terrible month for me.
We got
Yeah.
8 seconds.
8 seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle with your host Kilu Nyasha, and board hopping is Candy
Kinea.
Guidan. She's a new board op. So my very special guest today is Margaret Kimberly of the Black Agenda Report, and I'm going to before I introduce her, though, I want to call your attention to an event that's happening tomorrow. And it's happening in San Francisco at St. Mary's Square in Chinatown, 651 California Street, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. And it's about remembering and memorializing the quote, quote unquote comfort women. Women who were sexually enslaved during the wars and by Koreans and Japanese, and so tomorrow there will be statues dedicated to them. As you can see, the statues there on the screen. I also want to call your attention to Black Panther Party political prisoner Herman Bell, age 69, was viciously assaulted by guards at Great Meadow Correction Facility in Comstock, New York on September 5th. A guard struck Herman in the face, causing his glasses to drop, then pushed Herman against the wall, causing him to stumble and fall to the ground. The guard continued viciously assaulting Herman as about 5 other goons joined in the violent attack, hitting and kicking Herman all over his body, causing him to suffer 2 cracked ribs. He was also maced in his eye and face. Another coward took Herman's head and slammed it hard into the pavement 3 times. When this occurred, Herman thought he was going to die. So Herman was first locked in an isolation unit and left there alone for hours. He was eventually taken to the prison infirmary where x-rays confirmed he had suffered fractured ribs. His left eye is damaged from the mace and blows. He has bruises to his whole body and is suffering headaches, a sign of a possible concussion. Although Herman showed the doctor his hands that had no cuts, abrasions, or bruises, clearly indicating he struck no one, he has been charged with assault on staff. Defying common sense, they allege that Herman, for no apparent reason, slapped the guard, claiming he did this in a location out of the sight of all inmates, but in the presence of the other guards. The vicious and unprovoked attack by Comstock prison guards on Herman Bell is not only flagrant staff abuse, but egregious elder abuse on a model prisoner with no write-ups in over 20 years. He's been in prison for over 40 years. Herman had been scheduled to begin a 3-day family visit with his wife a few days after the incident, their first such visit in over 2.5 years. Outrageously, Herman is now in solitary confinement at 5 Points Correctional Facility, where he was transferred after this incident. For more information on what you can do, contact Claude at freedomarchives.org. CLAUDE, Claude at freedomarchives.org. And now I want to introduce you to Margaret Kimberly, who is the editor and senior columnist at Black Agenda Report. She's a regular guest on radio and internet talk shows and has appeared on Al Jazeera English, RT, WBAI, and KPFK, Pacifica Radio, Press TV, Iran, the Real News Network, Govorit Moskva, Moscow Voice Radio, and Grit TV. She was a contributor to the 2014 book Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. Ms. Kimberly serves on the Administrative Committee of the United National Anti-War Coalition, UNAC, the Coordinating Committee of Black Alliance for Peace, and the Advisory Board of Exposed Facts She is writing a book about racism and the American presidency. She is a graduate of Williams College and lives in New York City. Welcome, Margaret Kimberly. It's wonderful to have you here on Freedom. So good to
It's
see
wonderful
you.
to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. There's so much to talk about, and of course, you wrote a piece titled "The Hurricanes and Capitalism,"
Yes.
and of course, we are in the Caribbean and Florida, and Harvey and Irma have attacked Texas, Houston, and Florida, and now Maria is wreaking havoc all over the Caribbean, but particularly Puerto Rican has been hit very, very hard
Yes.
in the last couple of days. So let's talk about hurricanes and capitalism.
Well, I noticed, and it's not for the first time, whenever there's a natural disaster in the United States, we start to look like a so-called third world country. And it's very clear that our system is not set up to help people. And that's very obvious when there is a need for people to be given assistance by their government. But people are on their own. We are told if we want to help people, we're told to give to charities, dubious charities like the Red Cross, which no one should ever give money to because they don't help anyone. Excuse me. And so we have this, we're told we're a powerful nation, a rich nation, but we have a big military, but it doesn't help people get out of the way of a storm. People who heeded the warnings, who wanted to go to shelters in Texas during Hurricane Harvey would often get to shelters and find there was no room. Same happened in Florida with Hurricane Irma. And also, as we saw with Katrina, these disasters are used as an excuse to displace people. Once people are, especially Black people, have been driven out, the system works to make sure they don't come back. And New Orleans went from having a majority Black population in 2005 before Hurricane Katrina, and now it does not. So we see all the cracks in the system when these natural disasters take place.
Exactly, and the Puerto Rico, for goodness sakes, which is a territory of the United States, and the people there, although they're U.S. citizens, they don't have the right to vote, although they certainly can fight our wars for us. Okay, but
Yes.
yeah, they can be in the military, but they can't vote. And the island was already devastated by poverty and financial crisis. They can't apply for bankruptcy or anything, and so they were already suffering an austerity program. Talk about that.
Well, Puerto Rico it was astounding to me. I can't remember offhand the degree of debt that it's in. I mean, this is the same hucksterism and gangsterism that created the economic collapse of 2008. And we've seen that Puerto Rico was this island that was already poor. These banks made these huge loans that Puerto Rico is a commonwealth. The commonwealth can't pay back. There's no mechanism, as you point out, for any kind of bankruptcy. And the only solution is austerity. So the people did not take part in this theft. It's like Detroit. The people don't take part, don't have any power. But when the people who at the top make these terrible decisions, it's the people who suffer. And the only solution ever offered is austerity, that schools have to close, that government services have to be cut. Puerto Rico is currently experiencing an exodus of its population. There are always, obviously, a lot of Puerto Ricans immigrating to the mainland of the United States, but that has rapidly increased in the past couple of years. So Puerto Rico was first damaged by capitalism, by unscrupulous people, and now it's suffering the wrath of this hurricane. And everything I just talked about with the hurricanes that we've seen in other parts of the country, it's going to be even worse in Puerto Rico because it was in such a weakened, frail state anyway.
Right. Barbuda and the Virgin Islands are just about wiped out.
Yes, it's quite awful, and these islands live on the edge anyway. They depend on tourism, which is there going to be any tourism in Barbuda with destroyed country? Dominica
Exactly.
suffered terrible damage. We're talking about loss of power, destroyed buildings, and systems that, as I pointed out, don't care about people. And the United States, the biggest, most powerful nation nearby, doesn't give foreign aid the way it ought to help countries just for the sake of helping them. So all of these places are going to be in a desperate condition for a long while. It's very sad.
Oh, I know, and we don't see much help coming. I just hope that people will not rely on government and will rely on one another, and more people, especially those with means, will step to the plate and help.
I hope so, but at the same time, we need to get away from this idea of charity. After Haiti was suffered such a terrible damage from the earthquake a few years ago, people were told, give to the Red Cross. It's a reputable organization.
Oh,
Well, the Red Cross raised $500 million, then they just give the money to other NGOs. And only 6 homes were built. I mean, with $500 million, everybody in Haiti ought to have a new house.
It was unbelievable.
So
Yeah,
there has to be some change in how the system responds to these crises, because it's, excuse me, what we have now is not anything that helps people.
Yeah, no, I wasn't thinking in terms of charity, Margaret. I was thinking in terms of people helping each other. Just, very much like they're doing in Mexico City right now. People are really, volunteering to help one another. And even we saw it in Florida and in Houston too. People rallying to help one another, And I don't know how anything is going, people's lives are going to be saved and people are going to be rescued or assisted if that doesn't happen, if we don't, help one another. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, I think individuals will help each other.
Yeah, they seem to be doing that very well.
Yeah, I think, though, that these catastrophes make the case for socialism.
Exactly.
And in economies that are made, the whole purpose of their economy, their whole reason for being is to do for the people and to help the people. And I hope that discussion is one that takes place more often. And with climate change and the certainty that there will be more extreme weather events, be they hurricanes or droughts or floods, we will see more of this. And there are many arguments, I think, to be made for socialism, but I think the ability to help people, to have governments that exist for the purpose of aiding their population, is something that has to be taken more seriously.
Well, just look at Cuba. I mean, Cuba's been hit hard too, and Cuba is always has a plan in place, and they know how to handle these natural disasters because they care about the people first off, and it is a socialist country. Talk a little bit about how Cuba handles these crises.
Well, they have a protocol in place. It seems here in the United States, the rich, powerful country, is very haphazard, and it seems as if every time there's a disaster, it's the wheel is being reinvented, as opposed to Cuba, which has a protocol for evacuation, a protocol for moving people. Cuba suffers mostly because of the embargo the United States has against it, where it can't import the most simple items that it needs in order to carry out very basic tasks. But the government does have a system in place to save people, to save their belongings, and to try to restore their lives once the storms have passed. So they have lot less law. I'm not going to say they don't have any, but compare relatively, they have a smaller loss of life when these events occur, and but having an economy that's made to help the people, really, you really see it at a time like and such as these. And Hurricane Irma did hit Cuba before it hit Florida. So I saw pictures of people in Havana who were managing, despite the fact that it was flooding. But they have a series of caves which were used when there was a threat of a U.S. invasion, where people are taken in order to taken to safety at times like this, and they're utilized very well. So it's a model for the United States.
And there's no shortage of doctors and medical personnel.
And Cuba always, God bless them. I remember when the last Ebola epidemic in Africa, and the Obama administration did hardly anything. They built a hospital in Liberia, and Cuba, this country that suffered so much because of the United States, they sent hundreds of doctors and nurses to, at great risk to themselves, with Ebola being such a highly infectious disease, but they sent hundreds of people to these West African countries which were so suffering from this Ebola epidemic, and they did it again with the hurricane. So
yes, I heard
not
that
only do they help their people, but they strive to help people in the rest of the world as
exactly
well.
Yeah. And I'll never forget when Haiti suffered that awful earthquake in over 7 point on the Richter in 2010. Fidel was still alive, and they sent a ship, a hospital ship, to help, and the U.S. wouldn't allow it to dock and help the Haitians. It made no sense. But in any case, the disasters. Oh, I know what I wanted to. I lost my train of thought for a second. I wanted to talk about the fact that almost no one in the mainstream media mentions climate change with regard to these hurricanes, and the fascist 45 has taken the U.S. out of the Paris peace agreement with regard to climate change, and talk a little bit about what is the plan that they were doing? Clean power plan they've dismantled it altogether, and
yeah, there's a couple of things. You know, the damage to the world climate has been going on for decades. Trump has only been president since January. He cannot be responsible for the rise in ocean temperatures, which is causing these severe weather events. And we have to talk about the fact that these climate agreements are phony. That means if we're seeing the rise in world temperatures, ocean levels going up in 2017, that means it started back in the 80s. So we've had Democratic presidents, Bill Clinton. The Republicans were blamed for not ratifying the Kyoto Treaty, but he encouraged fracking. He encouraged offshore oil drilling. So did Obama. The last two climate agreements actually permit the world temperature to rise. So the powerful capitalist nations in the world, the US, Europe, China, Russia, all of them connive to make sure that these agreements are not really worth very much. So they will set a benchmark of their own choosing. a benchmark that allows them to continue producing fossil fuels. So I think we have to talk about the fact that these climate agreements are not as good as we have been told.
Right.
Democrats like Clinton and Obama talk a good game. Of course, George W. Bush is an oil man, so you know he didn't care. So he's like drill, baby, drill. But Clinton and Obama did the same thing, and so did their counterparts in Europe and China and emerging economies like in India. So I think the whole world is to be condemned for increasing world temperatures, for increasing fossil fuel production. Obama increased fracking tremendously.
I know.
So I think actually, when we talk about the climate, Trump can be blamed less than his predecessors, some of whom pretended to be environmentalists when they were not.
Right.
And I think we can blame all of the capitalist nations of the world for putting the needs of capital ahead of the needs of human beings. And we have a degraded environment all over the world. Brazil just announced they're going to allow mining in areas of Brazil where it hadn't been allowed before. So the Amazon, which creates oxygen for us, is being destroyed again. So I could go on and on with increases in mining, in fossil fuel production, which have brought the world to this brink. So many countries are to blame. But actually, Trump, despite his ignorance and despite his refusal to acknowledge that climate change is a reality, actually is let off the hook, because this has been going on for a very long time.
That's for sure. And it's pretty scary, the fact that everything's being reversed, and regulations are being, rolled back, and the fossil fuel industry has been given the green light to just do all the damage they want.
Oh yes, but that was true. People. It's such a funny thing.
No, I'm in agreement with you that it's been going on long before Trump.
Yes.
I'm totally in agreement with them, but I'm just saying that it's not going to get better anytime soon, and it's going to be up to people to take action.
Well, capital is the problem again. Yeah. And I know I may sound like a broken record at this point, but that is the problem.
For sure.
That has created this suicidal situation where species are going extinct. We're in the midst of a mass extinction. I'm told it's the sixth great. I'm not sure if it's the fifth or the sixth. I probably shouldn't try to say the number, but we are seeing a mass extinction event in Earth history, and this is one that was caused by humans, and it did not happen because of some natural cause.
I know I read a while ago, which is kind of scary because it's probably, the figures are probably higher now or worse, that 90% of the large fish are already extinct.
Absolutely.
Like, wow.
It's they talk about every certain species of fish being overfished and you shouldn't eat them. Every species of fish is overfished. Africa suffers where these, first it was Europe, now it's China, these huge trawlers off the coast that suck up all the fish. People who fish in order to survive have nothing, and then in turn are driven from their homelands. It's terrible what has happened. This consumption, so China, for example, as it becomes an economic powerhouse, its people become consumers. And I'm not blaming only them, but we have this constant degradation of the environment. So here, what do we have in the United States? Whole food, where we're told everything is organic and wonderful, but it's still overfishing. So when they advertise there's fish, caught fresh from Alaska, that's not sustainable. That Whole Foods now has this way of snatching up all the fish in Alaska. So there are fewer salmon, fewer of every kind of seafood. Meat production destroys the environment. Animal waste that pollutes the ocean. Now it's GMO crops. It's quite terrible what's being done now to the planet itself.
Absolutely. Let's talk about exposed facts. Will you tell our viewers what that is?
Sure. It's a project of the Institute for Public Accuracy, which was created to fight against the power of the corporate media and help organizations that are mostly left get their information out into the media. And Exposed Facts is a project of the Institute of Public Accuracy, and the goal of Exposed Facts is to aid and protect whistleblowers. And I'm on the advisory board, as is my colleague and comrade and mentor, Glenn Ford, Marcia Coleman Adebayo, another member of the Black Agenda Report team, and many other people who are notable. So we are fighting against government intrusion of our rights and of our privacy, and trying to protect whistleblowers
Right.
in our work as journalists.
Yeah, one of your colleagues on the board is Daniel Ellsberg.
Daniel Ellsberg, of course, the
Right.
man who started it all back in the Nixon administration. And yeah, it's a funny thing
The Pentagon Papers.
Yes, the Pentagon Papers, which the Nixon administration tried to prevent from being published, but the New York Times, to its credit, went ahead and published, which the New York Times today probably would not do.
I know, they've gotten terrible.
Yes. So, so yes, he is among the members of the advisory board as well. But now whistleblowers are punished. The Obama administration used the Espionage Act to punish whistleblowers. So people like Chelsea Manning, who was recently, he did commute Chelsea Manning's sentence, who I believe the sentence was 30 years, some horrible
35.
Yes, 35
Yeah.
years to be exact. And others like Chelsea Manning, John Kiriakou, I hope I'm getting his name right, former CIA agent who went to jail for exposing torture at Guantanamo. Now, the torturers, nothing happened to them. The only one who went to jail was the guy who exposed it. So
Right.
that
That's
is what Exposed Facts is meant to do, to assist people in whistleblowing and to protect whistleblowing, and to try as journalists to reveal as much as we can about the nature of our government.
Right. And Chelsea Manning, well, she did, what, 7 years?
I believe it was 7 years, yes.
Yeah.
And some of it's quite terrible in...
Yeah, but that's another case of the soldiers the military personnel that shot those civilians that she exposed. They're blatantly killing civilians. Did anything happen to them?
No.
Exactly. Same thing.
Yes,
And
exactly.
Which brings me around to the militarization of our police forces. And you wrote a book about killing Trayvons. You want to talk about that?
Yes, well, that was an anthology. I was among the contributors because I'd written about that case. The Trayvon Martin's murder brought to light the legalized lynching of Black people. The Malcolm X grassroots movement has to be thanked because they revealed that every day a Black person is killed by the police or security or by a vigilante, the way Trayvon Martin was. And while his killer is free, the attention given to his case galvanized millions of people. And now we know, and there are people who went about the business of counting police killings. And we know there are an average of 3 police murders every single day. More than 1,000 people in this country are killed by the police.
Exactly.
And in other countries, the countries that the United States likes to brag and compare itself to, never have a police killing or haven't had one for years. And we have them every single day, more than one every single day. And hardly any prosecutions. And
I
the
know.
militarization of the police, the giving surplus military equipment to police departments. We first saw that in Ferguson, Missouri. Obama finally stopped that. All these things he didn't do till the end of his term, which tells you how important it was to him. And members of the Congressional Black Caucus voted for these laws just as much as their white counterparts did. So now we have a return to this awful policy where police forces police departments, which shouldn't be armed anyway. Police shouldn't have guns. There's no reason for police to have guns. Not only do they have guns, now they have grenade launchers and tanks. So now we are going backwards, and that's one of the ways we're going backwards with Trump, with the return of this deliberate militarizing of police departments.
Yeah, and they've got Israel training our police forces.
Oh, absolutely. Israel plays a huge role training cops. Israeli companies do a lot of surveillance. Everyone's concerned about Russian spying. The country that spies on us the most is Israel, which is supposed to be an ally, the country that gobbles up most of our foreign aid, the country that whose allies control our politics. So yes, Israel is responsible for a lot of civil rights and human rights violations in this country.
Yeah, and one of their more recent violations, or their attempt to deny free speech. I mean, they're attacking people for joining BDS, for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. People are being, universities or professors and people are being attacked. Will you talk about that?
Sure. The Zionist lobby is trying. They know, it's interesting, they know that most Americans either don't care about Israel or are hostile to it. So when the BDS movement, this boycott, divest, and sanction movement rose up, they immediately went after anyone who could possibly be punished. So states like my home state here in New York have passed laws saying that state funds can't go to any organizations that engage in a BDS action. And now Congress is, they've pulled the original bill because of questions about its constitutionality. It would make it illegal to advocate for BDS. And it was originally written, it said that any boycott that was advocated for by a foreign government would be illegal. And that's clearly a violation of the First Amendment. So they are gone back to the drawing board, but I'm sure whatever they come back with will be equally terrible. So they're punishing with money anyone who thinks about participating in a boycott of Israel and Israeli companies. And this is the worst interference in American political life and domestic life of any country, and that's committed by Israel.
Exactly. Yeah, because the oppression and subjugation and colonization of the Palestinians is so egregious. It's just, and the Gaza Strip is just nothing more than an open air prison, and
yes,
it's so deprived. It's mind-boggling.
Yes, well, Palestinians are kidnapped on a regular basis. Children are used as human shields. Children are arrested. Children were the primary victims in the Gaza campaign of a couple of years ago. And Israeli settlers would, we were always told were endangered, they would sit up on a hill and watch the Gazans being attacked, being killed by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. So yeah, Israel's a major violator of human rights in their country, obviously, and they also exert their influence here in the United States.
Big time. Yeah, you can't keep a seat in Congress or even be in the White House without the Israeli lobby, without AIPAC.
Oh, absolutely not. Even here in New York City, members of the city council go on lobbying trips to Israel. I mean, this is their city council members. They have nothing to say about foreign policy. Uh, uh, Local legislators who may not even have many or any Jewish constituents, and they all go right along because they know that's where the money is, and they depend on money to stay in office, and they know if they don't go along, the money will go to an opponent.
Right. And you're also a member of the United National Anti-War Coalition, or UNAC,
Yes.
UNAC.
Yes.
Talk about that organization.
Well, we are staunchly anti-war, anti-interventionist, anti-imperialist. There was a lot of anti-war groups that sprang up in 2003 after the invasion of Iraq, but it turned out most of them were more anti-Bush and anti-Republican than they really were anti-war. UNAC, we're very proud of the fact that we have not changed our mission, no matter who is in office. So we opposed Obama's policies of war, mostly war by other means. He didn't invade any country with troops, but we are opposed to the United States intervening in the affairs of other countries. You may, whether it's by proxies, by sanctions, by drone warfare, we are anti-imperialist, and these can be very unpopular opinions. We oppose U.S. aid to Israel. That was a struggle we had even amongst us others in the anti-war movement. But so we're involved in actions all over the country and all over the world in support of the right of peoples to self-determination and to be free of U.S. aggressions.
And who is the membership generally?
UNAC as the title says, is a coalition of groups from all over the country, such as Veterans for Peace, such as Black Agenda Report, such as
What happened?
and other organizations, International Action Center, the Anti-Drone Network, the Coalition Against the FBI. So there are groups all over the country that are part of the UNAC coalition. The People's Organization for Progress, Virginia Defenders. My friends will kill me because I can't think of all the names of the groups. Socialist Action. There are people right there in your area who are involved in UNAC, who are active members as well.
Okay, we're having a little technical problem here. I'm not sure what happened, but we were hearing you, and yet you were kind of motionless on the screen. So Candy's working on that right now to try to fix it.
Okay.
Uh-huh. You know what happened? Oh, goodness.
I'm still here. I can see you.
I know, and we can hear you, but your face on the screen is just still.
I'm frozen.
Yeah, frozen is the right word. Well, I don't know what's happening. Oh, well, I guess we can keep talking. Can't we? Seem to be. What? Can we keep talking? Yeah. Okay, Margaret, let's just keep talking then.
Okay.
So maybe she can fix it, I'm not sure, but she has your face on the screen in any case, but for some reason it's not animated. Let's talk a little bit about political prisoners. You know, our struggle of the 60s and 70s and 80s, there are still people in prison now, like Ruchelle McGee, who's been in there 54 years. It's just mind-boggling. Sundiata Acoli is over 40 years. um, Chip Fitzgerald. He's around 50, probably 52 years or by now. It's between 35 and Leonard Peltier is suffering ill health right now, and
Yes.
he's been in prison over 40 years. It's just mind-boggling what's being done to our prisoners.
Well, the fact that it's important to say over and over again that the liberation movement was succeeding, and that is why it was crushed. That is why there was a COINTELPRO program. That's why people were targeted with these life sentences. Herman Bell, who was to have come up for parole soon, and it's assumed that's why the attack took place, to set him up, so to ruin his chance of possibly getting parole.
Yeah.
These people have been forgotten, but they're the tip of the iceberg in this horrible mass incarceration system that has 2 million people behind bars. The United States not only has more people, a greater percentage of its population, but the worst, most draconian sentences, sentencing juveniles to life in prison. So it isn't surprising that the Move 9, do I have the number right? It's 9, that the Move 9 are, correct me if I'm wrong, are still imprisoned. And
Absolutely, they're still there. And for an incident, it is so absurd because the 9 Move members were arrested for the death of one police officer shot with one bullet, and it was determined that it had to be friendly fire because of the trajectory. And at the trial's end, the judge said he didn't know who killed the cop. So they imprisoned 9 Move members, 2 of whom have died in prison since then.
yes.
And they're
Yes.
still in prison since 1978, August. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, but it's a funny thing. We're always told to condemn some other country for its human rights abuses, and it's generally a country that the United States wants to attack. And we're constantly told how horrible these other places are. But the country with the worst human rights abuses is the United States.
Of course.
The way the state operates against individuals, the fact that the police have the power to execute anybody anytime they want, the fact that the system is set up to put as many Black people as possible behind bars. We have a very inhumane system, and I argue the one with the worst human rights record.
Oh, absolutely. And right here in California, they have over 700 men in San Quentin awaiting execution. I think there may be a few women, but they're not in San Quentin. But on death row, I mean, it's mind-boggling to have people sitting there for decades while they quibble over how they're going to kill them.
Yeah, and it's so funny. The U.S. is always calling itself the leader of the free world and one of the free nations, and the other countries that we always compare ourselves to, they don't have a death penalty. None of the, supposedly advanced civilized countries have a death penalty except for us. And the harshness of the sentencing, the existence of a death penalty, none of it seems to have any impact on public safety. And these, and all these horrible punishments are meted out against the most vulnerable people, poor Black people, mostly.
Exactly.
So it's quite disgraceful, and I wish the rest of the world would condemn the United States as much as the United States condemns other countries.
Yes, and one more thing we can touch on with the minutes that we have left is the war. The wars that are going on. First of all, the war on terror is endless. That's
Yes.
ridiculous. And of course, the biggest terrorists in the world is the U.S. So,
Yes.
but and so that's a bad joke. And then the second thing is that 911 gave them the green light to invade Afghanistan. Had been there 16 years for what? and then they invaded Iraq on a barefaced lie of mass weapons of mass destruction. Everybody knows that, but they continue. The killing goes on, and now they're in Syria, making a mess. So, talk about some of these ongoing opportunistic wars, and it seems that they can't. It seems that the military-industrial complex is going, and the weapons industry is going to be supported no matter what. And if you're going to continue, if you're going to have a profitable military weapons industry, then I guess you have to continue to have wars.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we have a military-industrial complex. We have this huge defense spending. Democrats just joined Republicans in voting to support a $70 billion increase in our defense budget. And they go on and on about Russia. And this increase amount of $70 billion, that's Russia's entire military budget. So they're proposing a military budget that is 10 times the size of Russia's. And why? It's mostly to just exert American control over the rest of the world. It's to make money for corporations, as you mentioned, and also just for the United States in its efforts to try to keep capitalism afloat, to keep imperialism afloat, is to try to exert its influence as much as possible. And some of it is terrorism for terror. Some of it is to get stuff, to get oil, to control pipelines. Some of it is in the Middle East, it's to destroy secular Arab regimes, which happened in Iraq, which happened in Libya, and which they tried to do in Syria, using jihadists, the people who were told or so. Lest we forget, bin Laden was an ally of the United States, and this policy began in the Carter administration of arming jihadist groups to undo secular governments. So no, they don't want to ever leave Afghanistan. And, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they could not exist without the United States. ISIS flourishes everywhere where the U.S. has intervened. Iraq, Libya, Syria. Syria, fortunately, is defeating them. But the United States, I'm sure, will do everything in its power to keep Assad from truly gaining control of his country. And we have to be thankful that Russia finally came in and made good on its words and backed up Assad and prevented ISIS from taking over that country, which would have been quite terrible, obviously for the people of Syria, but for the world as well. Yeah,
well, we're running out of time, and I thought maybe you could talk, this is the perfect time to talk about the coordinating committee of Black Alliance for Peace.
Black Alliance for Peace is a new organization formed just in April of this year. And the title says the name. We want a people-centered effort against imperialism, against intervention, and one that, Black people were always in the forefront of the peace movement. Black people were always in the forefront of opposing U.S. foreign policy. The Obama administration confused a lot of people, and Black people signed on to things they would never have accepted from a white president, such as murdering Muammar Gaddafi and horrible Hillary Clinton laughing about having done so. So the Black Alliance for Peace, the purpose of this organization is to put a Black face in the anti-war movement, to declare that the struggle against U.S. imperialism is a Black people's issue. It is an issue which we used to lead in, and we want to resume that leadership again. And Jamu Baraka is the founder, and the coordinating committee will be in place for the next year or so while we decide our formation. But very proud to be connected with Black Alliance for Peace. I get them confused. I write for Black Agenda Report, and I'm a member of Black Alliance for Peace.
Right. And talk a little bit about Black Agenda Report, BAR.
Yeah, we're doing great. We have a new updated website, but in case people haven't seen it, we publish every Wednesday, and we present the news from a Black left perspective. We report on a variety of issues, domestic and international. Our team of Glenn Ford, Bruce Dixon, myself, Ajamu Baraka, Marsha Coleman Adebayo, Danny Haifong, Raymond Nat Turner, we have a poet, so we
I know
culture
Raymond.
very well.
Yeah.
Well, too, I hope I didn't. It's dangerous when you start listing people, because if I left somebody out, I'll be very embarrassed. But we have a great roster.
Bruce Dixon.
Yes, Bruce, of course, in Atlanta. And so every week we put together reporting, analysis, and Garrison. How can I leave her out? Of issues from around the country and around the world. And we are politically left wing. So obviously we cannot support the Democratic Party. We obviously work for the, I would say, the liberation of Black people. I know that's a big word, but we want to see self-determination for Black people. We have tried, and it's been a dismal failure, supporting the parties in the duopoly. There was a time when the Republicans were the party for Black people, and then the Democrats were the white people's party. Then they switched, and we switch with it, and we do everything we can to try to keep the white people's party out of power, but we end up supporting horrible things anyway. So it's Black self-determination that we are fighting for, and that we write about.
Margaret Kimberly, I can't thank you enough for being my guest here. I'm so sorry for the technical glitch, but we're still seeing your lovely face, even though it's not animated, unfortunately, at this point. But it's good that we can hear you, so at least we didn't lose the content. Thank you again for joining us on Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Thank Candy Keelan. Geenan. Oh, good. Okay. Sorry about that. But I should have written it down. But anyway, and I'm Kilu Nyasha. Thank you so much for tuning in.